The Birds, or Ornithes in ancient Greek, is a comedy by the ancient Greek playwright Aristophanes. It was performed in 414 BCE at the city Dionysia, where it won second prize. It has been acclaimed by modern critics as a perfectly realized fantasy. Remarkable for its mimicry of birds and for the gaiety of its songs, unlike the author's other early plays, it includes no direct mention of the Peloponnesian War, and there are few references to Athenian politics, and yet it was staged not long after the commencement of the Sicilian expedition, an ambitious military campaign that had greatly increased Athenian commitment to the war effort. It is the longest of Aristophanes' surviving plays, and yet it is a fairly conventional example of old comedy. The play begins with two middle-aged men stumbling across a hillside wilderness in search of Tereus, a king who was once metamorphosed into the hoopoe. They are fed up with life in Athens, where people do nothing all day but argue over laws, and they hope to make a new start in life somewhere else. They believe that the hoopoe can advise them where that might be. They have almost given up the search when, in response to their antics, a very large and threatening-looking bird emerges from a camouflage bower. Demanding to know what they are up to, and accusing them of being bird catchers, he is soon placated by their terrified assurances, and he then reveals that he is the hoopoe's servant. He returns indoors to fetch his master, and moments later the hoopoe himself appears. A not very convincing bird who attributes his paucity of feathers to a severe case of molting. He is happy to discuss their plight with them, and meanwhile one of them is suddenly visited by a brilliant idea. The birds, he said, should stop flying around like simpletons and instead should build themselves a great city in the sky. Since this would not only allow them to lord it over men, it would also enable them to blockade the Olympian gods, starving them into submission the way the Athenians had recently starved the island of Melos into surrender. The hoopoe likes the idea, and he agrees to help implement it, provided of course that the two Athenians can convince all the other birds. He calls to his wife, the nightingale, and bids her to assemble the world's birds with her celestial music. The notes of an unseen flute swell through the theater, and meanwhile the hoopoe provides the lyrics, summoning the birds from their different habitats, birds of the fields, mountain birds, and birds of the trees, birds of the waterways, marshes, and seas. These birds begin arriving individually, and each of them is identified on arrival. On discovering the presence of men, the newly arrived birds fly into a fit of alarm and outrage, for mankind has long been their enemy. A skirmish follows, during which the Athenians defend themselves with some kitchen utensils they find outside the hoopoe's bower, until the hoopoe at last manages to persuade the chorus to give his human guests a fair hearing by diverting them into a crowd of small children. The cleverest of the two Athenians, the author of the brilliant idea, then delivers a formal speech explaining that the birds were the original gods and advising them to reclaim their lost powers and privileges from the Johnny-come-lately Olympians. The audience of birds is won over by this speech, and they urge the Athenians to lead them in a war against the usurping gods. The clever one then introduces himself as Pistotyrus, or trusty friend, and his companion is introduced as Euripides, or good hope. They retire to the hoopoe's bower to chew on a magical root that will transform them into birds, and meanwhile the nightingale emerges from her hiding place. An enchanting figure of feminine appeal, she presides over the chorus of birds while they address the audience in a conventional parabasis. Hear us, you who are no more than leaves, always falling, you mortals benighted by nature, you enfeebled and powerless creatures of earth, always haunting a world of mere shadows. Entities without wings, insubstantial as dreams, you ephemeral things, you human beings. Turn your minds to our words, our ethereal words, for the words of the birds last forever. The chorus delivers a brief account of the genealogy of the gods, claiming that the birds are children of Eros and grandchildren of Nyx and Erebus, thus establishing their claim to divinity ahead of the Olympians. It cites some of the benefits the audience derives from the birds, such as early warnings of change in seasons, and invites the audience to join them since birds easily manage to do things mere men are afraid to do, such as beating up their fathers and committing adultery. Pisthetirus and Euripides emerge from the hoopoe's bower, laughing at each other's unconvincing resemblance to a bird. After discussion, they name the city in the sky Cloud Cuckoo Land, and then Pisthetirus begins to take charge of things, ordering his friend to oversee the building of the city walls while he organizes and leads a religious service in honor of birds as the new gods. During this service, he is pestered by a variety of unwelcome visitors, including a young versifier out to hire himself to the new city as its official poet, an oracle monger with prophecies for sale, a famous geometer, Meton, offering a set of town plans, an imperial inspector from Athens with an eye for a quick profit, a statute seller trying to peddle a set of lodge originally written for a remote, barely heard of town called Olympics. Pisthetirus chases off all these intruders and then retires indoors to finish the religious service. The birds of the chorus step forward for another parabasis. They promulgate laws forbidding crimes against their kind, such as catching, caging, stuffing, or eating them. And they end by advising the festival judges to award them first place or risk getting crapped on. Pisthetirus returns to the stage moments before a messenger arrives with a report on the construction of the new walls. They are already finished thanks to the collaborative efforts of the numerous kinds of birds. A second messenger then arrives with news that one of the Olympian gods has sneaked through the defenses. A hunt is organized. The goddess Iris is detected and cornered, and soon she wafts down under guard. After being interrogated and insulted by Pisthetirus, she is allowed to fly off to her father Zeus to complain about her treatment. Hardly has she gone when a third messenger arrives, declaring that men, in their multitudes, are now flocking to join the new city in the sky. Another set of unwelcome visitors arrives as advertised, singing because they are inspired by the new city. One is a rebellious youth who exults in the notion that here, at last, he has permission to beat up his father. The famous poet, Synesius, is next, waxing incoherently lyrical as the poetic mood takes hold of him. Third is a sycophant in raptures at the thought of prosecuting victims on the wing. All of them are sent packing by Pisthetirus. Prometheus arrives next, sheltering under a parasol because he is an enemy of Zeus and he is trying not to be seen from the heavens. He has come with advice for Pisthetirus. The Olympians are starving because men's offerings no longer reach them. They are desperate for a peace treaty, but Pisthetirus shouldn't negotiate with them until Zeus surrenders both his scepter and his girl. Sovereignty. She is the real power in Zeus's household. His mission accomplished, Prometheus departs just moments before a delegation from Zeus arrives. There are only 3 delegates: the brother of Zeus, Poseidon, the oafish Heracles, and some even more oafish god worshipped by barbarians called Triballions. Pisthetirus easily outwits Heracles, who in turn bullies the barbarian god into submission, and Poseidon is thus outvoted. The delegation accepts Pisatyrus' terms. He is proclaimed king by a heavenly herald, and he is presented with sovereignty, a vision of loveliness. The festive gathering departs amid the strains of the wedding march. Hymen-o, Hymen-io, Hymen-o, Hymen-io. So here's how that went down. Well, that's the end. We hope you liked the story and had a great class this quarter. Goodbye.